Yes, so I'm John Jackson. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas for the first 10 years of my life. Um, Moved to New Mexico for a short period of time, moved back to Texas, and at the age of 17, uh, my aunt made a bad choice that resulted in me being incarcerated. She was a drug dealer. It's who I learned all my entrepreneurship skills from. It's how I learned how to be an entrepreneur and start businesses and do everything that I get to do. But she had drugs in the car, and she asked me to take the drug charge for her when I was 17, and I did. And that was my first time being arrested. About my family, I never knew who my father was. I was raised by my mother, and it was my mother who we moved to New Mexico. When I moved to New Mexico, she took us out there. My brother and I had one brother and one sister. I don't remember a lot about my childhood. Um, I do remember that I was 11. I was on my way to school, and I found my mom's car parked on the side of the road, and it was her murder scene. She'd been beaten to death. I was 11, so they never found out who did it. But after that, that's when I went to live with my aunt. And that time was also that was my first interaction with law enforcement. So I lived with my aunt, and I respect and I adored my aunt. She taught me grit, determination, resilience, and entrepreneurship, which is a huge factor in my life. I don't know if it's because I was just young, but it wasn't a big deal for me. For some reason, I felt, well, I actually know why. I felt proud because my aunt praised me for what I did. She told me, good job, this is what you do for your family, you protect your family. So when I went to jail, I felt like I did something right, I did something good, which was not the case. I was given a slap on the wrist. It was my first time ever being arrested, so 2 weeks later I was released. But my aunt did exactly what she needed to do, which was praise me, good job, this is what you do. And after that, I was all in for a criminal lifestyle. Shortly after that, I committed my first armed robbery. Before the end of that year, I'd committed a total of 4 armed robberies and 7 violent felonies. And I made my choices when I was 17 years old. I had no idea that, I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I had no idea that 10, 15, 18 years later, I would still be that I would be at a supermax prison 18 years later. So my path to prison, my path to incarceration started. It started with, I committed 2 armed robberies in Texas, where I was from. I bailed out, and then I absconded. I went to California and committed more armed robberies and was sent to the San Bernardino County Jail, where Texas and California gangs are very different. California is so structured, so militarized. And when I got there, I joined a gang immediately. I was sent to Sentinel State Prison. Level 4 yard was my first yard. I was 18 years old, around a bunch of grown men who were on a maximum security yard. I got in trouble from the start, just because I'm good at getting in trouble. But this is also the way that just the way you promote. You engage in violence, you engage in the gang and criminal activity. So I did. This was my way of gaining respect, gaining responsibility. So I did. I leaned all the way in, and it resulted in me doing 4 years in solitary confinement for my gang involvement. And eventually I was sent to Pelican Bay State Prison, which is a supermax prison in California, where they house their country's top gang leaders. The day that I changed my life, I know the day, it was the day before my 33rd birthday, October 22nd. I was supposed to be going home the next day, and instead of going home, I was starting another 4-year sentence for crimes I committed while I was incarcerated. I was on my 4th year in solitary confinement, and in prison, or at least the prison that I was at, going out to yard is mandatory. Just in case a riot or anything happens, every soldier needs to be on the yard. I didn't go to yard that day. I told my cellie is the person that I live with, say, I'm sick, I'm cool, I ain't going to yard today. Not a big deal. And I cried. That was the first time I remember ever wanting to go home. Before that, I thought I would die in prison. The phrase that we have is till the casket drops, and that's literal. That I'm with this till the end. I'll die. So I thought that this was what I signed up for. I signed up to die in prison as a gang member. But eventually, after that day, I told my homeboys, like, hey, I'm done with this shit. Like, you guys can do whatever you want. You can kill me, you can do whatever you want, but I'm more afraid of dying in prison than anything you guys can do to me. I was called a punk, a piece of shit. Every name you can imagine. But eventually, my homeboys respected my decision, and some of the top leaders in my gang, one of them, he pulled me over. We were on the yard, and he asked me, do you really want to do this? And he's a terrifying gentleman. He was first arrested when he was 4. He did 32 consecutive years in solitary confinement, and he's been incarcerated for 40 years. And when he talks, you listen. He's a CEO. He's an amazing CEO. He just does terrible things. But he asked me, is this really, really what you want? And I told him, yes, it's what I want. He said, good. So you're too smart. Oh. So you're too smart to be in here. You could do so much more than die in this place. I said, mind your own business, go home. Nobody's going to bother you. And nobody did. Because the rest of the followers followed. But after that, Defy came to the prison, to Pelican Bay. Pelican Bay was a lockdown prison. We had no programs there whatsoever. Every time we'd come out, it was a riot, fights, whatever would happen. So we never had programming. But the founder of Defy fought tooth and nail to make sure that we got programming. And we did. And I had all these CEOs and executives coming in and telling all of us that we had value, that we had worth, that we could do so much more than die in prison. And we started to believe them. And we also learned that a lot of the skills we've learned in gang and criminal life are really great business skills. And I graduated from the program, became a peer facilitator, and used that to, instead of everyone coming to me for drugs or phones or all the other illegal things that I used to do, people started coming to me for resume feedback, business ideation feedback, like going over their business plans, over their business models that we were working in. So that was how I was able to transition out of the gang and into a path of advocacy for other people and myself. We had about 50 people, and that first cohort, we have myself, we had a guy named David Nguyen, who also went on. He works for the mayor in Los Angeles now. He runs one of the districts, who've gone to start businesses, gone on to just not go back to prison. I was released June 19th, 2019. That day was, it was a 10-day process of release. There was a typo in my transcripts. So the crimes that I committed in Texas, in 2014, they flew me back out to Texas. I signed for time served. I'd been incarcerated at the time. When my sentence would be over, I would have done 18 years. So Texas didn't want me, so I signed for time served. However, the court transcriber forgot to check a box. So when my release date on June 9th at Pelican Bay, I had lawyers and everyone advocating for me, saying, hey, all Texas wanted to hear was that I was John Jackson and that I had served 18 years in prison, and the prison refused to do that. So the federal marshals came and picked me up, flew me to Texas. I had lawyers threatening to sue the sheriff. They would not release me. They were going to send me to TDCJ for an additional 4 years to finish out my sentence. And until a lawyer threatened them with kidnapping, they finally released me. But it took me being shackled to a chair for 5 days. I lost about 15 pounds. They didn't feed me, they didn't do anything, because they just didn't want to let me go. It's all because of a typo. So I respect good grammar now. So the way that I met the mentors in the community that I have today after I graduated from Defy in 2018. I became a peer facilitator, and I also started leading the events. I became the MC to lead the business coaching events. And that put me front and center in front of all these CEOs and executives who were coming to prison to be business coaches, from like founders of Uber to like venture capitalists, all these amazing people who have done amazing things in their careers. And they believed in me. And when I got out, they surrounded me. They are huge. They are a huge part of why I am where I am today. They're still my friends, my mentors, the people that I turn to when I need help, or the people I turn to when I need advice. They're huge advocates for creating change. And when I got out, I get to go hang out with them. I get to go see them. I get to go to their houses and pick their brains. And they became my chosen family. I don't have any contact with my blood family, but these people became my chosen family. So I've chosen not to expunge my record, but that's because of the work that I do. I believe it's my strength. I get to show people that not everyone with a criminal record is what you might think they are. I don't look like I did 18 years in prison. I don't look like a former gang leader. I don't look like any of that. So when you meet me, I get to show you or anybody else that the stereotype is not true. And while I have not experienced barriers because of my criminal past, I have a lot of homeboys. There are people who come out of prison who consistently experience those barriers of trying to get a job, trying to get housing. They have parole requirements they have to meet of getting a job or you're going back to prison. However, if you can't get this job and you can't get this job and you can't get this job and you can't get this job, and then you get sent back to prison. So that recidivism rate goes right back. You have another stat in the recidivism rate because someone couldn't get a job, but their parole requirement is that they get a job or you go back to prison. But we place every obstacle in their way so they can't get a job. Or you have to have stable housing. But everyone would love to have stable housing, but when you have a criminal record, especially I don't know what it's like in Utah, but in California, when it is perfectly legal for a landlord to say, no, because it's not even like employers can pass on you on a job after the criminal background and say they gave it to someone else. But if you want to get a house, it's perfectly legal for a landlord to say, oh, you have a minor drug conviction from 20 years ago? No. And there's nothing wrong with that. When we're discriminating against people regardless of their crime, what I feel like they fail to realize is you're getting an extra layer of accountability from someone who is on parole or probation. You have a parole officer or probation officer you can call. You can't drug test your tenants, but guess what? Their parole officer can. Their parole officer does. They have much more to lose than anybody else that you might find as a potential tenant. One thing that I learned in prison was how to be extremely clean, extremely detailed. And like my house is spotless. It will always be spotless because I don't like dirty stuff. I used spending the vast majority of my life in a 8 by 12 foot cell where I wanted to be clean. I carry that over to my house, and maybe the people that I know do that as well. So the partying, the destruction that you might get from another tenant, you're not going to find that from someone who's formerly incarcerated. Whenever I share that I have a criminal history, whenever I share some of my story, there's a good chance that someone, if I'm talking to a group of people or one, they're going to share that I have someone who, my loved one, or I have been incarcerated, where they're not comfortable sharing that with anyone else. They don't share it, and it's because nobody talks about it. And I don't say nobody, but most people don't talk about it. They're ashamed of it. They're ashamed of a loved one who's incarcerated. But whenever other people start to share, when they start seeing people who don't fit what they think is someone, like you have here at the office of Rasa, we have these portraits of people who are formerly incarcerated, and you would think these are just typical business leaders. They don't fit the movie stereotype that you see of gang leaders or criminals or whatever label you want to place on them. So I think that it starts to break down what people think. But Hollywood or the movies, the way that they like romanticize prison or jail or whatever it might be like to come out, it's not like that. Another part of it too is employers start to realize the more employers we talk to, the more we're able to point out, these people actually have criminal histories, and you're missing out on some of the top employees. There are plenty of studies that show people with criminal histories outperform people without criminal histories day in and day out. I think it was Toyota or one of those car companies that did a study, and they will outperform you all day. So employers start to see the financial benefits of hiring people who are formerly incarcerated, not just from a turnover standpoint or from a production standpoint, but also from the money it costs to incarcerate people or reincarcerate them for not having a job or not having housing, or the small things that we reincarcerate people for. So after I was released in 2019, well, I'll take it back. I was released in 2019, but I had started my career while I was still incarcerated. I started developing curriculum while I was incarcerated, and for an organization called Hustle 2.0, which I helped build and scale, and I was one of the original contributing authors. And it was even the guy who pulled me over and told me if this is really what I wanted was a part of it. The founder came into Pelican Bay, and she's a powerhouse, and she is the only person that I know that could come into a supermax prison and pull all the top gang leaders in there. And she asked us, well, first she told us, "You think I'm scared of you because you're some big bad gang leaders? Nobody cares. You're gonna die in here, no one will care." That was her opening line. And then she asked us, "If you die today, why would your life matter?" None of us had a good answer. Nobody had a good answer for that question. And she asked us if we wanted to use our voices to create positive change, that the next generation of gang members, the next generation of people who wanted to join gangs would listen to us, and they do. So we started developing a curriculum that was written in the voices of people who aren't incarcerated, not written by some random white person who's never been incarcerated and has a PhD and it would be too scared to walk a prison yard. We wrote the curriculum, we taught ourselves to write curriculum, and we developed 12 evidence-based, trauma-responsive, gender-responsive workbooks that now serve in over 47 states and 900 jails and prisons, and create a pathway for people to go to college at Southern Utah University. So that was my first organization, and then it no longer needed me, which is a great thing when an organization no longer needs you as much as it hurts. Now, today in Utah, so I resigned from my first organization in April of this year, April of 2024, and I thought I lost my purpose. I felt like I didn't know what I would do. I do believe that God put me on this earth to do the work that I get to do. My 18 years in prison was not a waste. It set me up for what I get to do today. So after I resigned, I felt just lost. I felt like I lost everything that I was supposed to do. I feel like I'd given up my mission that God had given me. And that's like, then I got an email from Jeff Lamb, who I met in prison. He had came to Pelican Bay in 2018. I think he was there for one of my first events. And he emailed me, he said, "Hey, did you know that the 5 Inchers is, my son is raising the money to bring the 5 Inchers here to Utah?" I said, "I didn't know that. Thank you for telling me." So I emailed Andrew, the CEO, and said, "Hey, I heard you guys are coming out here, and you will not find anyone better to do this job other than me. I graduated from the program. I know the program. I've built organization. This is what I do." And so I think they made the right choice. And I'm grateful they chose me. So at Defy, we leverage entrepreneurship to teach people who are incarcerated how to take their skills that they learned through years of gang and criminal and gang involvement and start a business, to become great employees, how to write a resume, how to talk about their criminal histories, which I think is very important because ban the box is great in theory until they find out. So we teach upfront disclosure and owning your story. And it's why I have never had obstacles with my criminal history, because I will tell you my story in a compelling way, and I'll win you over. And when we teach at Defy, when we teach our entrepreneurs in training how to talk about their criminal histories in a compelling way and be the owners of their story, no one's gonna kick you out of a job interview right there on the spot. They're gonna wanna hear more. And the honesty is refreshing, as opposed to like 80% of people who are applying for jobs are lying. So when someone comes in and is telling you the truth and owning their history, owning their past, there's power in that. So we launched our first cohort at the men's facility at Bear One. It's called Bear One. It's the facility in the Utah State Correctional Facility. It's the kick-out yard where everyone who is gang involved and in restricted housing gets sent to. So I like starting with the toughest. They're my guys. I love them, and it's also where we'll see the biggest change. So right now, my program. What time is it? I don't know, but the program manager is. Oh yeah, our program manager is in the prison right now. They're learning about purpose. They're learning about finding a purpose, whether it's in prison, whether it's out of prison, but living a life of purpose. That's the course they're working on today. We raised the money to launch a women's cohort at Dell, which is the facility where the women are housed. and we'll be going there on December 3rd to kick off their class, and I'm excited to see what they get to do. I know that the first cohort, I was the first cohort from Defy. They're always the strongest because they're the early adopters. They're the ones taking the biggest risk. Everyone else who enrolls, they're taking a huge risk as well. They're taking a leap of faith that we're going to be able to guide them and help them make changes in their life. But the first ones are the early adopters. They're putting their necks out there. Purpose means to me is using my life, using my story, using my experiences to empower others, other people who are incarcerated, and to show other people who have maybe never touched the justice system that whatever you think it might be, it's not. Bringing people to prison, showing them what it's really like in prison. And I believe that a part of my purpose is the more people that I take into prison and show them what's going on, the less they can hide, the less can be hidden behind the walls of what they do, of what happens across the country. So starting to expose less bad behavior can happen when I'm bringing people from the outside. I want to build, so the vision is to build and scale Defy here in Utah to every jail, every prison that will have us. Whether they have us or not, we'll figure out a way to get in there. Build the post-release program, build the reentry program, build the entrepreneurship bootcamp program, build our investment committee. So we are creating a pipeline of people coming out of prison into jobs, into starting businesses, who then hire other people who are formerly incarcerated, who get investment from venture capitalists here in Utah. So it's not just stuck to people who go to entrepreneurship schools and colleges, the only ones getting funding for their businesses. For people who are still incarcerated, I would say that if you wait till you hit the gate, it's too late. These are patterns, the behavior patterns that we've engaged in are wired in our brains. They are hardwired in our brains. And it's taken years and decades to form those pathways, and it's going to take years to undo them. So getting started early and programming, starting to realize your potential, starting to realize what you're capable of, and starting to realize that the skills that you've gained are valuable skills. Don't be ashamed of them. Don't be proud. I'm not proud of the destruction that I caused or the harm that I caused, but I've left that stuff behind, and I've taken the best of what I've gotten over my time in prison and my time of incarceration. For people who are just coming out, you gotta ask for help. I know. I talked to the California Parole Board, and they said, in their opinion, they believe that the number one cause of recidivism is people who don't ask for help, because then it creates a cycle of hiding and shame, which leads to somebody making another bad choice and going back to prison. So as hard as it can be, ask for help, find mentors, find people who want to help you. They're there. Your brain is not telling you the truth when it says no one cares and no one wants to help you. There are people who want to help. So ask for help. So the mentors that I have and who they are, why they had such a big impact on my life, I'd say the first one is Peter Hazelhurst. He was the founder of Uber Pay. So I'm like, when I first met him, like, why is this dude here? When he came to prison, I'm like, why is this dude here? He could be doing anything. But he believed in me, and he was one of the first ones who pulled me aside and told me, hey, you speak much better than most people that I work with and who are supposed to be great presenters. And that gave me a boost of confidence. It made me feel great about standing up and sharing my story and leading and getting to learn from him today. He's started another company, and it's what he does. He's a serial entrepreneur. So getting to see him take those risks and getting to watch him risk a lot of stuff to build something and interrupt sectors is really inspiring, and it makes me want to do that. And it motivates me to, like, I want to break stuff in a good way. The other one would be Tom Williams, who's a venture capitalist. He's the one who paid for my attorney after the typo in the court transcripts. The biggest impact he had on me was, in Defy, we do this exercise called life maps, where we write out the good and the bad and the ugly of our life on a timeline, and we share it. And he was the first person I was sharing with him my life map, and I was 15. I got kicked out of school, and I never went back. And he's like, nobody came to look for you? The truant officer, the school district, nobody came and asked any questions on why a 15-year-old never went back to school? I was like, no. And he's like, oh, the system failed you. I never even thought of it. And when I think about my 15-year-old self, I was like, I'm a kid. Somebody was supposed to come look for me. So and he's been a mentor and a friend to me ever since. I will say that I think it's sad that like myself or a few other people are the exceptions to the rule. It's infuriating that I'm an exception to the rule, that I'm here, that I own a home, that I have a job, that I get to do these things. It's sad that I get to be an exception to the rule, that a handful of people get to be an exception to the rule when there are so many people who could create change in this world and do amazing things, but we tell them that you can't because you made a bad choice when you were probably a teenager. And because of that, we're going to punish you for the rest of your life. And we're going to discriminate against you for the rest of your life. When I think the reality is that if we all had to walk around with a t-shirt that said the list of all the bad things you did or if you, before you started a conversation with someone who was going to invest in your company or hire you, if you had to say, hey, hold on, before we start this conversation, let me just tell you all the bad choices I've made, and then let's have that conversation. That maybe if we thought about it that way, create some empathy for those of us who have criminal record. So to get involved in Defy Utah or Defy Ventures nationally, but I'm biased to Defy Utah because I live here in Utah now. You can get involved by going to our website and you can see all the events that we have coming up. So yes, we're a nonprofit and we do need funds to help. It's $1,700 per person to put one person through the CEO of Your New Life program. And that's the program that I graduated from. So every person who gets funded and goes through that is taking the same program that I took and setting them on the same path. But we don't just ask for money. A lot of organizations may just, hey, give us money and let us do this. That's great. Yes, I want your money. But I also want you to roll up your sleeves and come see the impact of our work, coming to prison, being a business coach, being a mentor, maybe being one of the ones who, like Peter or Tom, who had a huge impact on my life. Mentorship makes a huge, huge impact in this world. So coming to prison and getting involved is the best way you could do that. And you could do that by going onto our website, going to the volunteer, and signing up to come to prison, which is actually a lot of fun.